Thanks everyone for being here today. My name's Tammy, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Partial, which is an art marketplace platform showcasing art by emerging and diverse artists from all across Canada. On behalf of everyone here at Partial and Imprimo and CARFAC, we're really glad to be able to gather everyone here today at the beginning of the new year and share this conversation together. Now, artists imagine and create work all across this beautiful country we call Canada, land that Indigenous peoples have stewarded for 15,000 years and continue to do so today. As organizations founded by settlers on traditional Indigenous lands, to speak of Canadian art calls on our commitment to decolonize past structures in the arts sector, celebrate Indigenous peoples' history and diversity, and create space for Indigenous creators to create their art and culture. Today, we have speakers tuning in from different parts of Canada, from the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Métis, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, and also calling in from the traditional unceded territory of the Maliseet, Mi'kmaq, and Peskutu-Muktati peoples. I'll now pass it back to JD, CEO of Imprimo, and we can get our conversation started.
Amazing. Thanks, Tammy. A little bit about the event. So we've introduced recently our partnership with Partial, which we're really excited about. And we've been flooded with questions ever since, what is Partial? How do I sell my work online? And so on. So quite excited today to do this event with Partial. The event today will touch on a few things. We'll touch on some of the lessons that we've learned as a company building Imprimo on what is the best approach, or what are some some of the best ways to increase the opportunities and increase your presence online and drive engagement. And we'll also hear from Partial on some of the lessons that they've learned building Partial on different ideas on selling your work online, tricks and tips and so on, as well as hear from a few of our speakers on how they went about building their online presence, what worked, what didn't work, as well as kind of what was their experience with Partial. So we'll also give you a quick overview of our platform on Imprimo. We'll give you an overview of the platform on Partial and answer all your questions at the end. So with that, we'll go into our first conversation, which is going to be with our artists. We have April Pine here and Lynn's, man, I'm sorry if I don't say that right. I think it's Mayo. I don't know if it was Maijo or Mayo. You're on mute, Lynn's. But I'd like to welcome the two of them, as well as Tammy, the CEO of Partial, to join us for a conversation. Lynn's, you're still on mute. All right, perfect. So with that, what I would like to do is I'd like to start by giving a chance to, we heard a little bit from Tammy, give a chance to Lynn's to introduce herself as an artist, and then we will go with April. And while Lynn's is introducing herself, I'll show a little bit around her profile in Imprimo so you can get a little bit more familiar with her as an artist and with her work.
Thanks so much, JD. I'm so happy to be here today. This was awesome. So I'm Lynn's Mio, and I am an abstract painter. I did not start out as a painter. I started out more as a graphic designer. I worked in publications. I worked in advertising. I went into creative direction. I did a lot of sort of art adjacent activities for many, many years. And then I kind of got older and said, wow, what do I really want to do? And I really wanted to paint, and I just wanted to take some time with that and see what could come of that. So I started painting professionally, I guess about 5 years ago. Of course, it doesn't feel like 5 years ago with the pandemic and all that. And my initial feeling was just like, how do I do this? And I literally went to every show that I could think of. And I went and I asked artists that I liked, and I said, how does one do this? And I actually met Tammy at one of those very early shows and got to know a little bit about Partial, and was just like, okay, so there are avenues that you can do this. Like, I'm a mom, I'm busy, I don't have all the time in the world. I can't be at every show. I can't go to every show. I can't pay thousands of dollars to do the shows every time, or to travel to different places and be away from my family. So for me, it was just a really natural transition to go online. But at the same time, I didn't really do that without meeting people in person first and kind of quizzing everybody that I could get it into conversation with and just say, you know, how does this work? Does this work for you? Are these people legit? Like, is this going to be okay? Like, there was a lot of questions and you don't really know. So it's really important to kind of form those conversations and those relationships in person, I think, and then carry that online. I wouldn't try and just start fully online. I think that would be really, really difficult if you didn't already have a little bit of a community in place to tell you kind of what direction to go in.
That's great. April, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey as an artist, and what's your inspiration in your work?
Sure. My name is April Pine, and I do geometric abstract paintings, really inspired by my time living in cities. They tend to be fragmented because I see the world as very fragmented. But through my work, I try to bring a sense of peace and wholeness back to the world. I love color, as you can see from my work. And like Lynn's, I came to art I started doing work professionally about 6 years ago. And I did it completely online because I'm so introverted and I'm so reserved. So for me, Google was my friend. And that's how I've done most of my art journey. It's been online. And so I'll be happy to share some of those things with everyone today.
Amazing. And Tammy, why don't you tell us a little bit more? I know you introduced yourself. Love to have a quick kind of what brought you to Partial, why you got this started just quickly, and then we will dive into our panel.
Okay, yeah, I guess I also am someone who's not professionally trained in the visual arts or in that space. I come from a graphic design, communications, marketing background. And I guess like how Partial kind of manifested, I've always been a bit of an entrepreneur, but I think maybe around 2014, 2015, I started to like have this idea percolate in my head, which just kind of came out of this need of seeing friends of mine who were starting to invest in their homes and all that sort of stuff, not really have an idea of where to get art. They were coming to me as their kind of friendly, somewhat art savvy friend to ask, hey, Tammy, you know, I want to get some art. I don't necessarily want to go to a big box store, but I know nothing about galleries. Do you have any suggestions? So I was like, oh, this is interesting. There are these folks who are kind of, without maybe even calling themselves that, like turning into art collectors, but they just didn't have a gateway into that space. And then on the opposite side, I had artist friends who were, you know, creating all this work in their studios, and it was just piling up. And they were practically like giving it away. They were trading, sharing it with friends and family, which is wonderful. But I guess like seeing, as someone who comes from like a freelance design background, I kind of saw this like gap of people who want art and people who have art. And then also, how do you empower creatives and artists to be able to generate some kind of living from this wonderful work they're creating? So that idea kind of percolated. I started doing research, and then in 2016 launched Partial as just like a trial Squarespace site. And from there, was really lucky to bring on my tech co-founder, Chris, and we gradually built Partial into what it is now. Learned a lot of lessons on the way. It definitely wasn't as simple as I thought it was going to be. I think art commerce in Canada is not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of learning there. It's still a very like green industry, I think, which is really exciting because there's a lot of room to experiment. And over the last couple of years, I think I would say like, yeah, in the last couple of years have really seen like a boom in the online art world in Canada, like wonderful platforms like Imprimo popping up. And yeah, it's interesting. It's nice to be part of, I guess, this space that is just really coming into its own now. So that's Partial. That's how we started.
Thanks for sharing. To be honest, the first time I heard that story, I knew that our missions were really aligned, you know, both coming from the angle of we come from a rights management of artists, and you come from the side of, really wanting to help, artists and collectors come together and so on. And I think, we really share your vision and your mission here. So when we looked at whether it was building Imprimo, building Partial, or in the case of many artists here trying to build their own online presence, I think that's a challenge that many people are facing. It's not obvious. Typically artists tends to be good at their craft, not necessarily good at building websites and things like that. However, every artist is an entrepreneur, whether they like it or not, is the nature of the beast, which comes with the importance of really expanding your network on a continuous basis. Many people hop for the road of galleries, but the road of presenting yourself online is definitely an avenue that can be interesting to many people. So when we looked at building the presence online, I'd be curious to see April's and Lynn's, like, how did you go about it? What were the platforms that you were using, and how did you see that change over the years? So why don't we start with you, April, and then we'll go to Lynn's.
Sure. Well, I started on Instagram, which I'm still on, and Facebook, which I'm still on, but I was also on Twitter, which was, maybe it works for some people, but I found it to be really inappropriate for art, which is so visual. And so for me, my online presence was really scattershot. Like, I thought you were just supposed to get your art in as many places as possible. And so not only was I on like a lot of social media platforms, I was even on Pinterest. I was on everything. I also was on many different, I guess, art platforms. I was probably on 4 or 5 at one time. And I got some really good advice. And someone said, you really need to focus. Quality matters more than quantity. And I'm grateful that that's around the time I came into contact with Partial. And that was really eye-opening for me. And so for now, I have very few platforms that I'm on, because I've found that to be best to cultivate the relationships on those platforms as opposed to being on many different things.
And what about you, Linz? What has been your experience? How did you approach this? Did you start with a website? You start with social channels, different platforms? Take us through your experience.
So I, I'm good to like go talk to people in person, but online, I have been an intensely private person my entire life. I am one of like, when the aliens land, I will be one of the very few people that never had a Facebook. I never had one. I have never been on there. I refused. So I did an Instagram, but it was anonymous. It was, the first one was like, nobody knew it was me. And I was posting anonymously for a little bit. And then I got a studio with a Kin Collective, and other artists started telling me like, like that's not really a thing. Like, you're not just gonna get discovered or something. And like, people are gonna be like, it's just weird. It's just weird. So stop doing that. So yeah, pretty much as soon as I actually like put my name out there, put my face out there, said, this is what I'm doing, things started happening, and I got on Partial, and Partial did a nice little feature on me, which was awesome. And like, it was good to kind of build things that way more organically. Like as I was doing the work and people were noticing the work, then I was able to gather followers that way instead of like having to really promote myself. Because it's just, I agree with you, April. There's like too many venues, and a lot of them are just kind of black holes. You're just like throwing your time and energy into them, and you don't get anything back from them. So I think people really have to do what they're comfortable with and like what feels good to you. Like, I wouldn't have been able to start with everything public from the very beginning. I needed my time as an anonymous artist in order to kind of get started. But yeah, take your time, do what works for you.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so,
yeah,
and
I
what
was
are the
definitely public way too soon.
I think for many people, there's a lot of people who are still hesitating to get started. But the question is, just start somewhere, do something, right? But like you said, Lindsay, start with your own comfort and make it from there. So what are some of the challenges that you guys face when you first start building your online presence, or whether that was on Partial, on Instagram, other platforms? Like, what are some of the challenges that you start facing?
I'll go first on that one. I just found it really challenging to kind of like parse all the messaging. You get so much messaging like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is how you're supposed to be doing it. Post this much, post at this time, post this, post that. Like, it's just like, it's overwhelming. And again, as a person who didn't necessarily have a lot of free time to devote to this sort of like other area of my life, it was really difficult to figure that out. And then on top of that, once I did start posting with my name and I was getting some attention and there was some press happening and whatnot, there was actually like trolls that came out on that. And I was not expecting that at all, but there were people like, you know, like, who do you think you are? Basically, like, you just got here and you're getting this attention, and like, why? And I'm just like, I don't really care why I'm getting the attention. If you want to get some, go get some. Like, I can't really explain that to you, but yeah, so it was really just a very strange experience of not really knowing which way to turn, and then kind of getting like this backlash of like, huh? Like, why?
That's interesting. I think a lot of people are facing that, and that's not something that is talked so much. And it can kind of feels, when it first happens to you, you're just like, oh, what's happening? Is this normal? Am I doing something wrong? So I think it's
Yeah.
great. It's great that you bring it up to, if other people are experiencing that, it is quite normal.
Well, I think it really, it hits a nerve because, a lot of times you get stuff from friends and family, like, is this what you really want to do? Like, this is what you're going to do right now. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. So for me, it kind of toughened me up. But at first I was just like, where is this coming from? Like, this is so weird. And I'm like, this is why I was never online before. See?
Wow.
I
And
feel like
what about, go ahead,
Oh,
April.
sorry. I was just going to do a quick side note before we hear from April, but I was just going to say, I think that's like kind of one of the good, like, that's the good and bad thing with online, is suddenly you're exposed to so many different people. And so that's really unfortunate to hear that one would get negative feedback, because I think like creating art is already quite a vulnerable path to choose. So it's kind of unnecessary to get that kind of feedback on. And I think that's sort of the thing with social media. That's, like Instagram is a great, I was about to say it's a great platform. I'm trying to decide if I still feel that way, considering my own like Instagram addictions, but it's a thing that has an effect on people. We can say that much. So yeah, it is hard to balance the different things. Yeah, but I'd be interested to hear like April's take, because Lindsay, you're mentioning you are someone who's very comfortable with putting yourself out there, and April, you're a bit more controlled or private in that regard.
Yes, it's true. I think one of the mistakes I made in the beginning, and it's funny because I've had a lifelong love of art, and I would carry around my little watercolor paints with me everywhere I went for years, but I just thought you couldn't make a living at it. And then one day, just exploring the internet, it was like a world opened up. It's like, wow, you could make a living at this. And so when I pursued it wholeheartedly, I actually think I put my art out too soon. Like, I don't think that I was quite, I don't think my art was quite in a place where it should have probably been exposed to the world just yet. I think it probably needed some more time to percolate. I probably need more time to develop my own voice before I put it out into the world. But if you look on my Instagram, that art is still there for anyone to see. Because the funny thing about it is I feel like it was a mistake, but at the same time, there are people that started following me back then that still follow me today. And they've been great all of these years. They've applauded me when I've done well. I've gotten really good feedback from people over the years, and not a lot of negative. I'm so grateful. And for me, I understand what Linz is saying as well, because it's very difficult to put yourself out there online. I got advice from my brother, who's much more savvy about these things. He's like, you need to put your face on your Instagram. I said, why do they need to see my face? I'm selling art. I'm not selling my face. But he said, people need to have a personal connection, and a face helps. And so that has also been a challenge for me as a very private person to share those parts. But I'm working on it, and I'm getting better all the time.
I mean,
Yeah.
JD and I've had conversations about this too, like as someone, I mentioned this before, I wasn't, when I started Partial, I wasn't by any means an art expert, but something that I learned very quickly was that I think people who are buying into art that's at a certain price point, and that price point could be, we'll say, over $100 for some people. If it's someone who's trying to cross that threshold of going from big box art to an original art piece, a lot of it is about buying into the artist and the artist story. And I know that the profiles on Imprimo feature the artist heavily. On Partial is the same thing, because I feel like the aesthetics of the art piece capture someone's attention, is what captures someone's attention. And then for them to really buy into it is at least in my opinion, and I'm also this type of art buyer, is I then buy into the artist. And because it's definitely a choice for someone to choose to invest in someone. And if they don't know that person or don't know too much about them, and it doesn't have to be their entire story, but I've seen artists on Partial offer a very professional distilled version of their bio, and then others who just go right into it, I love this food and I love this and I love that, and both work. It's sort of whatever the artist is comfortable with.
So an interesting point to add to that we heard from our buyers is one of their favorite part of owning art is to tell the story of it to your friends. If someone see that art piece, oh, I really like this. Oh, let me tell you more about this artist and journey and so on. And which is a very exciting part, but it's not always easy to find. Right. So I think it's important that as you put your presence out there, that you also keep that in mind, trying to make it accessible very easily. So giving some of this, I know, Tammy, we start with you giving their profile on Partial, but what are some of the advice that you guys would give to someone who's trying to improve their online presence?
I mean, I would say that, definitely including insights into yourself helps, whether it's on a platform like Partial or Imprimo or on your social media account. It's true. People love seeing someone's face. I think people also love seeing behind the scenes stuff, and there are different ways of going about it. Obviously now there's time-lapse videos and TikTok world, which is kind of beyond me, but all of this is sort of getting people just want to see how things are done. And I also feel now this is me putting on my marketplace hat, but I think sometimes for people to understand the value of art, if they don't know what it took to make that piece, they don't understand why it costs XYZ. So sometimes those behind the scenes glimpses are great. I think April, you kind of touched on this, which was nice, is to streamlining things and maybe thinking about your flow of, definitely having a social media presence is great. Think about okay, once I have someone check out my Instagram, maybe I want to make sure that in my bio, I have links to the places to my personal website, to where you can buy my art, to my upcoming shows. Kind of think about your journey of how to take someone who's just passively looking at something into someone who's engaging with you. But maybe I'll stop there because I'm sure April and
that's some great advice, though, because I would say one of the things that we've noticed on many people, even the one that have amazing, work and things like that, you look on their social platform, it's but how do I see more? How do I see something different? And it's not always easy. So I thought that was actually some great feedback. What are your thoughts, April? And what advice would you give someone who's trying to improve their online presence?
I would say present your art well, take good pictures of your art, because this is where people are seeing your art. And I know this should be a no-brainer, but it's something that I've needed to continually work on, my photographic skills, because I didn't grow up taking pictures of everything. And so learning how to take pictures of paintings really well, or your art really well, and showing it in ways that make it look its best in different environments. I would say being consistent with wherever you're at, being consistent, producing the art. I would say engaging with people online as well, engaging with people when they ask questions or if they give you a thumbs up or whatever the case might be, because today's fan is tomorrow's collector. And I would say also to create a real plan for yourself. Like my 11-year-old nephew says, a goal without a plan is just a dream. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Linz?
That was awesome. Everything that April just said, absolutely. Please stop taking pictures of your art at like midnight inside a closet with a flash. It's just not good. Don't do that. Nobody wants to see that. I think there's a lot of that out there. And yeah, that presentation really does matter, not just online, but also if you're going to be applying to other shows, sending work to galleries, et cetera, et cetera. And I would just take that a step further and say, think about what you want to do. We throw around this word in the art world a lot, the exposure word, the E word. If you just want exposure, okay, there's lots of ways to get exposure. There's tons and tons of people that will say that they're giving you exposure, but is that a career and is that what you really want? So personally for me, I want to do more fine art. I want to be working with galleries. I want to be on a higher end. So it doesn't make sense for me to be on an exposure website with, the girls in bikinis, like standing next to a painting. I don't know why they do that. It really bugs me. I also question, like Tammy said, like the time lapses and stuff are really cool. They can be extremely, extremely engaging. I think that that's a really good thing to do as long as you're doing all the other stuff online. But if you're only doing the time lapses, if you're essentially like creating ASMR videos of you making art and then wondering why you're not making sales, like your followers are not going to necessarily be art collectors that are looking to buy that art. The making of it and the sounds of it could be very, very engaging. But again, are those followers going to be the people that are actually leading to sales for you? And so just keep your eye on the ball in terms of what you really want to be doing.
Yeah. And it sounds like universally everybody's like, you need a plan and work the plan is kind of, and then reflecting on, is that working for you? Seems to be a key element here.
Yeah, well, you have to do that because everybody's got their hand out. Like, everybody is taking money from artists and artists don't have any money to begin with. Like we're starting from nothing. And then, every gallery is like, pay this hanging fee. Every show is like, pay this fee for this. And like everything costs money. So just be really targeted about what you actually want to do and what you actually want to put those marketing dollars towards.
And I think also like dollars and time, I feel this with Partial too. Like Partial is a small business. If we could do all these things, like I'm not that social media savvy. Like for some young people, sorry, I've got this like cold that everyone seemed to get over the holidays, working through it. But I was going to say like, I guess thinking about how long things take you and whether you can afford that time. Because, for artists, you're not only expected to like create great work, but you're also then trying to manage a social media account and like update your website and keep your platforms up to date and like, stay on top of shows or grants or what have you. That could easily be a job for, 5 people. It's sort of like maybe keeping an eye on what is actually not just generating likes, but what's actually generating a meaningful engagement. It's okay if you have 90 followers on Instagram. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're less successful because you might be putting that time rather into social media. You've realized that, showing up at your neighborhood art fairs and doing those every summer are how you make it work. And that's okay, so I think it's like kind of like experimenting and realizing you can't do all the things, but just choose the things that work for you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And Tammy, you told us a little bit more about why you created Partial, and I'd love to hear more about what did you see in the marketplace? I know that Partial has a fairly focused approach towards their arts on the marketplace. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the needs that you saw and how you're going about filling it?
Yeah, so I think like something that I learned very quickly was that first of all, the Canadian art market is like a teensy tiny drop compared to the rest of the world. You know, like Europe and the US and Asia is a much more stronger and robust art buying market. Again, I look on like the glass half full side of things, where because it's still a growing industry in Canada, there's a great opportunity to shape it into something that is like, I guess, like representative of what we want to say Canadian art means. So I think like learning through all that, I realized that perhaps the affordable art category, and I'll use affordable art as work that's under $5,000, is definitely maybe the place to start for Partial. Because I mean, when we started it, I wanted regular people to realize that they could be art buyers and art collectors too. And I also know that for artists, there's the opportunity for like a more meaningful connection between someone in their locale who's like recognized their work. I think that's really exciting when someone who is, say, like in Toronto and then sees, you know, work by April in New Brunswick, or sees work by Lynn's in Toronto as well, to be like, hey, I can actually afford this. I can put some money aside, or I can use our like rental program or something to bring that work into our house. Like, I think that was the first step, was just wanting people to try bringing original art into their house and making that accessible. So that meant giving them lots of options online. That was like one thing, like, yeah, to a one-stop shop. Like not everyone's comfortable with walking into a brick and mortar gallery. I think brick and mortars are amazing. They serve like a very wonderful purpose in terms of like an experience for folks, and for a certain type of art buyer, it's where they go. But I think for the vast majority of folks in Canada, an online space where they could see thousands of options, see work that's anywhere from, say, $50 to over $5,000, use the tools that are available with technology like augmented reality and stuff to place things in their home, read about the artist, and actually be able to connect directly with the artist. These are all things that I kind of learned the hard way as we built Partial, as to what would work and what wouldn't work when it came to art buying. I just ended up, you know, working with Chris, my co-founder, and a team of really wonderful collaborators to sort of build things to replicate that really meaningful, like, human aspect of art buying that I think is important, and try and imprint that onto like a tech experience so people can like do that from their couch and, you know, within a week have an art piece hanging on their wall.
Yeah. I think in the pandemic, a lot of it probably came very, very handy to be able, especially like the AR. So.
I mean, that was interesting. Like during the pandemic, I think we had something wild, like the number of art rentals and art sales like increased by like 5 to 10 times just within that period. Because I think that was a really like a horrible time, but also a special time for folks to like spend time at home, reflect on where they're putting their money. There was like more of a movement towards supporting local and makers and artists, which I think was long overdue. So that was, that was good, but yeah.
Great. And so April, Lindsay, both are selling your work on Partial. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what attracted you to Partial? Why did you go on Partial? I know we heard from Lindsay how you met Tammy, but why don't you go and tell us a bit more about how you went about this? We'll start with you, April.
I was attracted to Partial because it was Canadian. I'd worked with larger art, you know, online, let's say retailers from the US. And I found like I was just getting lost in the shuffle. And I thought, you know, I think I think my art is original and interesting, and I just don't think there are enough eyes on it. And so I liked that Partial was Canadian. I liked that they were very like hands-on with my artwork. Like they've been so good about marketing my art and pushing my art forward and talking about me as an artist. It actually taught me a lot about marketing, just looking at the way that they do their newsletters and, you know, the way that they do their Instagram. And so these were things that attracted me to Partial. I also liked that they had a system for, you know, that they didn't accept every single artist, like that I was juried in, you know, so that they had a certain standard for their art, well, and I appreciated that. And I felt so good, you know, when I got in. I told my husband, I was like, they chose me. I was so excited, you know, and yeah, it's been a really good experience working with Partial.
Amazing. And what about you, Lindsay? You met Tammy
Yeah,
alive.
same. I mean, April, we are so in sync here. Partial was so aspirational for me. Like I hadn't even put a painting out there, you know, and I had met Tammy. They were doing you guys were like hosting the thing in the beginning of the outdoor art fair. And I was just like, whoa, this is so cool. They have like an artist lounge here. They're doing these interviews. Oh my God, this is like amazing. Yeah, I was really into it. So I thought it was just really, it felt so affirming to have my work on Partial. And it did feel like they had a really strong handle on the quality control. And it wasn't just kind of a free for all, which unfortunately a lot of sites are. And yeah, the Canadianness is a big deal. To everything that Tammy said earlier, you know, we just don't have the opportunity to ship things like they do in the States. And that's a huge problem in Canada in terms of the proliferation of online art. There's really kind of a limit of what you can do. And so with Partial, that I'm able to speak directly with the buyer, that we're able to talk about, like, are you in the area? Can I drive it to you? You know, and that opens up a lot more possibilities in terms of the work that I'm able to sell. So I personally, I work big. I like big work. I'm a person like, this one is huge. I don't really want to have to dumb that down in order to sell into the States. And I don't sell any small work on Partial. This is something that's really near and dear to me. I sell big work on Partial. I have $30 prints on Partial. I have never sold any of the prints on Partial. I have sold big paintings that I've had to deliver and install because they're so big. And that's awesome. Oh, and I wanted to tell a pandemic story. Can I tell a pandemic
Go ahead.
story?
Yeah, for sure.
So in the middle of pandemic, like when there was really like full lockdown, like hardly anything was open, I got a rental request, and the woman who did the rental, she lived like a block from me. So she was like, can you deliver this? Like, I really, really want to make sure that we get some new art in the house. Like, it's so boring here. We need some light and color. And I was able to deliver the painting. We never met in person, but it just felt so good to just, put it on her doorstep and then get a message a half an hour later that she loves it. And here's what it looks like on the wall. And then when I walked by, I could see it in the window. And like, this just kept me going for like all pandemic. And we just kept chatting and trading messages like, do you see the coffee shop is open? Like, it was such a good connection to have to kind of bring that. And rentals are awesome, like for people to be able to try art, because I think there's also a kind of this idea like, what if it doesn't look like what it looks like online? And photography of art is really tricky and it can be really difficult, and art does look different in different light conditions. But I've never had a rental come back. All of my rentals that have gone out on Partial have been purchased, and it's just really nice to know that people were able to try it before they buy it.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting concept. The idea of
I
being
really
able
love
to rent it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I'll let you finish, JD. With the then
I was just gonna say, I think it's really awesome, the idea of being able to rent it. Like, Linz, I think you're right. You look at something online, you get to see it, you put it in your space, and you're like, is this gonna really work? And many people have that question, and because of that, they probably don't move forward. But now you're able to try. It's like, it doesn't work, I can just bring it back. But when the reality is, once you have it on your wall, you're probably, no, it does work. So now I want to keep it. I don't want to go and find another piece. So I thought it's a really interesting way to kind of tease the people who maybe today are out there buying prints on Etsy or something like that, to have an opportunity to kind of de-risk their approach to buying original art, maybe for the first time or something like that. So that's certainly one of the part of Partial that I think is quite attractive, that you don't see being done successfully many places.
Right.
Yeah,
And then go ahead.
Oh no. Okay, sure. I'll just quickly. I mean, I was gonna say, like, that was. I realized I hadn't spoken too much about the rentals, but like, yeah, that was part of, I guess, like the mandate of Partial was like trying to get more art on more walls. So what does that mean? It's like creating more accessible bridges to art. So like the rentals, the way that those work are for artists who have a pro subscription, they can have their artwork insurance protected and rented for certain periods of time, depending on who the renter is. And then at the end of that period, the renter can just pay the difference to own it. And this was sort of twofold. As I was doing my research, I realized that some artists were like loaning their artwork out. And then of course, me being like freelancer advocate, being like, oh, your time is your value. I was like, loaning? You mean not generating revenue for this piece that you have created that this person should probably pay you for? That's why we built this like rental model to create like a model where artists could generate some revenue with this artwork. You know, the goal, of course, is that the renter would pay the difference at the end to own it, but also even if they do return it after that period of time, in my mind, it's still a win for the artist to have generated that income, and that person would have enjoyed that piece for X number of months. People would have seen it, so on and so forth. But then, yes, but also, again, going back to things I was learning about the Canadian art buying market, like the more bridges we could build to make it easy to try, low risk, the better. And I think like the excitement of, the stories that you're sharing, Linz, about people connecting was really is a huge reason for why we made Partial the way it is. Like, I love those human connection stories. And yeah, it's exciting when people who thought they would never be an art buyer become a first-time art buyer and maybe become a lifetime art collector. And I think that's an amazing gift. So
I agree with that.
Yeah, I have a little more story. Can I
go ahead.
More? So before the summer sale, Tammy, when I knew the summer sale was going to happen and it hadn't been announced yet to the public, I had a rental. And when I went to drop off the rental, like, I just always thank people in general, like, not just thank you for like buying my art, like, thank you for even looking at art. Thank you for even considering art. Thank you for making a place in your budget for art. Like, this is a really important, special thing. And I told them at that time, it was a rental that I was dropping off. And I said, here's my work. I hope you love it. I hope it's perfect for you. But once again, I want it to be perfect for you. If it's not, by all means, bring it back to me, and I'm happy for you guys to buy something else. And there's going to be a sale. So if you needed like a stretch goal of like, here's something that we can't quite afford, but you might be able to afford it now. So I'm just telling you, you don't have to buy my art, buy somebody else's art, but buy art. Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
And just one more, I know, sorry, JJ, I know there's another question you want to get to, but I was going to say that sort of post sale thing to then go back to, like things that artists can do to, I think, like turn that, you never know if that like one-time art buyer might just become like a lifetime art patron for you. But April, I'd actually purchased a small piece from April. April, you're obviously not in Toronto where I am, but there are ways to create that connection, even if you don't see each other face to face. Like April, you packaged it beautifully. You included this lovely card. Yeah, things like that, I think, really seal the deal for somebody from the art buyer side. Yeah, so that was just one more note for people to take.
I think that's a good point. Really kind of, you go online and you build, you have the sale, But you know, if you're not able to meet with them face to face and have that relationship, like Lynn said, like that, just a special note to like that, like it does go a long way, right? And it really makes a difference on whether this person is going to continue to interact with you as an artist, right? And try to seek, you know, to see what else you're building, what else you're creating, and so on. But April, tell us more about your experience using Partial. You know, some personal experience that you've had. You know, things that you like, and how you found the checkout process with the buyers. Because I know a lot of people had questions around how does that work and what has been the experience from people on Partial.
Well, I'll go back just for a moment to what Tammy said about the way it was packaged. And because I'm a self-taught artist, I'm always trying to learn. And Partial actually had like a mini seminar on packaging for their artists. Like, how do you package your artwork correctly? How do you get it there so that it'll be safe? And I took my notes, and I decided, because I sell larger paintings, but I also sell very small paintings, because my thought was that I wanted all kinds of different people to be able to buy my work. You know, I thought about people I grew up with and family members. And I know how special it is to hold a piece of artwork in your hand. Even if it's very small, it's still original to the artist. And so the thought is you can make that very special for a person. But to talk about more about my experiences with Partial, I have loved using the checkout aspect of Partial, because you can interact with the buyer, with the customer. They can ask you questions. I've gotten beautiful, wonderful comments from people during that time, telling me how they love the work, and really encouraging me with my art and with what I'm doing. And Partial makes the checkout aspect really easy. So the first time I went through it, I thought, oh man, the shipping, like, do I have to do something special for the shipping? But Partial had included all of that in the checkout process. So it was really seamless for me as an artist. And I would also say that Partial has been really wonderful with presenting my artwork. You know, the sale, they put it on the front, on the first page, you know, of Partial's website. So I've had a really good experience with Partial. I've been with them for 2 years, and I don't see anything changing anytime soon.
Great. So Tammy, what advice would you give people who've never sold work online? Because I know we've have many people on the call today who have never sold online, or a lot of questions about this. We keep getting into our inbox leading up to this event. So what are the advice you would give to someone who's maybe approaching this for the first time, maybe it doesn't even have a strong online presence, still shy about it, I'm not sure about the process? What advice would you give those people?
I think, well, definitely get started. If it's like, you know, don't be afraid to get started. I think it can feel overwhelming to set up profiles and put your work out there. But I think the hardest part is just getting started. I think also having a few different avenues, like maybe, I mean, the thing that I've always used to say is, like, you know, with Partial, we wanted to sort of disrupt the industry a little bit, in the sense where we weren't out there to be like a gallery with the strict gallery models and the strict gallery commissions that were relatively high, I would say, when I first entered the space, compared to what I thought was reasonable for an online platform. But like, do your kind of in-person things. I think that, like, spreading your web to reach as many people as possible. So with Partial, we do our work to try and not just attract artists, but also like art lovers, art likers, art buyers, and have them all kind of gather in one place. And a lot of that could be driven from traffic via individual artists' Instagram. Like, sometimes we have folks, I mean, we also have like partnerships with some organizations. So a really great partnership we had with OCAD, I'll use this as an example, that actually drove OCAD's audience to Partial, which was amazing, because suddenly all these folks who were interested in buying OCAD art we're also then introduced to art by artists who maybe weren't affiliated with OCAD. And that was really exciting. So I think the same kind of theory could work for artists is, think of your handful of streams to funnel into one place. I mean, hopefully that's Partial if you like the platform. But yeah, find a way to make it easy for people to buy your art. And some people can manage it on their own. Like we've tried to cover everyone's bases in terms of making the checkout and all that stuff easier so that artists don't have to manage it themselves. But yeah, we also captured a lot of stuff in the conversation that I think was helpful in terms of like how you photograph your work, how you present yourself. But yeah, I think just getting started and feeling it out, and you can always tweak your profiles like you can on Imprimo as you like, as you learn. Yeah.
Great. And now on to the hard question. How do you guys go about pricing your work? Because I know that for many artists, this is the continuously hard question on how do you go about this? How do you know you got the right price point? Many just default to the galleries doing that for them. But for you guys who are selling online, how are you going about pricing your work? Do you want to start, April, and then we'll go with Lynn's?
Sure. Because I'm a self-taught artist, I looked at other artists who were in the same that I was. So I looked at their experience level. I looked at, where they'd shown their work and how they were selling their work. And so I looked at people that were around my price point, and I looked at what they were selling their art for. There are different formulas, of course, for selling your art, the square footage. I mean, if you sold art by the amount of time that went into it, I don't think art would ever sell, because I spend just as much time on small pieces as I do on a large piece. So I know that pricing can be very difficult, but that was what I did. I looked at other artists and I did research in that way. And honestly, I have gone wrong with this as well. So it does take some tweaking.
Yeah. And what about you, Linz? Any how do you go about this? Any tips or tricks?
So for several years, I priced, I did the comparables and whatever, and then it was purely emotion, just straight emotional pricing, which was a mistake and probably something that I shouldn't have done. And then when I started working with galleries, my prices weren't high enough, and they'd be like, no, we don't want to take your work because your price isn't high enough and it doesn't make enough money for us, and it's not worth it. And then I got some really good advice from a curator who said, you know what, like, I know that you want regular people to be able to buy your stuff. You're way better off to do the gallery pricing and be like, hey, let me do you a solid and like make this affordable for you, as opposed to having a different price for regular people and a different price for galleries. So at this point, I'm into a very simple homemade pricing matrix that is square inch plus complexity plus time plus materials. It's really easy. It just spits itself out.
Cool. Many different aspects to make it easy at the end for you. Tammy, I know that Partial has some guidelines to help make that a little bit easier for artists who might be doing that from the first time. Any tips around how to go about pricing for someone who may have never sold work online before?
Yeah. I mean, Mina later on is going to actually be able to show one of the like tools we have on Partial that addresses this very complex question. But yeah, I would say like what April and Lynn's brought up, those are all great. I think definitely thinking about the time that it takes you to make a painting, and maybe this is a good exercise for anyone who hasn't done it before, is like actually log hours for an art piece and just get a sense of actually how many hours did this take me? Because, it probably took a lot longer than you thought. I think sometimes people are like, oh, it's just my time. And I just did a couple hours here and a couple hours there. But once you start logging it, it's like, wow, this like small painting actually took me, 20 hours. And then maybe one way of going about it is like, okay, let's say 20 times whatever a reasonable hourly rate is, plus materials, let's say plus packaging if you're shipping. That should give you at least a baseline of at least what it could cost. Like that's maybe one way of going about it. Of course, there's so many other things that go into that factor, like your CV, your years of experience, your reputation, all that sort of stuff. But I think in terms of just pricing fairly and honoring your time and your talent, yeah, establishing, it's better to go a little bit over than under. And I know this, even as someone who, you know, was a freelance designer, it took years to learn to not undervalue myself. And you'd also be surprised what people would be willing to pay. Like, I think folks have a habit of like bargaining internally on behalf of the art buyer, when really they would have been like, oh yeah, great, sure, I'll put it on my card or whatever. So I think, yeah, honor yourself, think about what it's worth. And then if they are like genuinely like, oh my gosh, I love this piece so much, but it's just a little bit over what I can afford at this stage, you can, you know, come up with a plan, maybe offer that they rent it for a few months and then they pay the difference. You can give a bit of a discount if you need to, but it's, yeah, it's a tricky one. It takes practice, but yeah, maybe like think of what your work is worth and then like add like 20% or something.